Welcome to Supply Chain Now, the voice of global supply chain. Supply Chain Now focuses on the best in the business for our worldwide audience, the people, the technologies, the best practices, and today's critical issues, the challenges and opportunities. Stay tuned to hear from those making global business happen right here on Supply Chain Now.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Scott Luton and Greg White with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's episode. Greg, special show today.
Yeah, 1,000.
Episode number 1,000.
That is unbelievable. You know, the average podcast, I think, only lasts 12 episodes. Is that right, Scott? You've quoted numbers like that before.
So it depends on a couple different sources, but yes, it is. You're dead on. Folks, it starts to dawn on them how difficult it is to be consistent and churn out content and monetize the content and build a business out of it. So, but on the flip side, we're approaching, at least according to listennotes.com, 3 million podcasts across the globe. How about that, Greg?
Wow. That is a lot. And I think we have upwards of 2.5 million plays ourselves, right?
That's right.
Something like that. We'd have to do the math, but
I'll break out my protractor in a minute. Right. We'll do that math. But
if you ask me to do math, this is going to be a very long episode.
But hey, folks, to our listeners, thank you for following us all along the way and tuning in and giving us all your feedback. We're going to touch on that in a minute. But really, what Greg and I want to do is share some of the thoughts and observations, kind of behind the scenes. We'll touch on some of our favorite guests. We've done a few of these milestone episodes. We'll talk about some of the business observations we've had, both for ours and the industry,
right,
and some other fun things, we hope. So stick with us here. But Greg, I'll start with, before we get into the kind of the segments here. We've talked about this a lot. I don't think episode numbers mean much to anyone other than the folks that create the content or the show. What's your thought there?
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, I think it's really impressive, and we and other podcasters or whatever, live streamers, digital media persons, they're really impressed with themselves when they hit a big number like this. And I think a lot of times, and we've had this discussion internally, should we bother with the episode number? I think it's cool. I think it's cool. I wonder if other people think it's cool. Hey, you know what? Whether they like the numbers or not, I'm really thankful that all these people have listened to all these episodes. And I have a feeling some people are going to start calculating, because we have several people who listen to virtually everything we do. They're going to start calculating the number of hours that they've spent with us. And they're probably going to consider themselves part of our company or family, right?
As they should.
They may become dependents. They might claim us as dependents.
Right. Depends on how the revenue code works like that. But
right.
But I love the point you're making, because that's really where we want to start today. This is a no frills episode. This is Scott and Greg, as authentic and straightforward and natural as it comes. Big thanks to our listeners around the world who have been on this journey with us. That's been the best part in so many different ways of this journey. And we're going to touch on kind of what, how that started and kind of where we are now. Big thanks to our growing team. We've just added more to the team here just this week. They're truly, Greg mentioned the word family. It is a family, right? We're in the trenches together, building something of significance and on a mission together to do good and to move the needle. And, that team allows Greg and I and all of our hosts and our guests really to amplify the voice of supply chain, be it focused on stories, people, critical issues of our time, you name it. And that's really where we want to start is offer you our gratitude in a very heartfelt way, because that's been the best part and such an important part of what we've been doing for years now. Greg, your thoughts there?
It's all that matters, right? I mean, without listeners, what is the point? And we hear, first of all, we hear from them so much, their ideas and their thoughts and their insights and inputs. And we appreciate every single time that occurs. And of course, we know that they are spending their time with us, right? And it's valuable time. And just appreciate that so much. And, you're the reason. Everybody says this, don't they? But you all are the reason that we do this. There's no other reason to do it. I mean, we do think we're pretty important and pretty smart. I happen to think Scott is the best podcast host on the planet. And I would defy you to find someone else who's as good. I mean, it's like sitting next to Walter Cronkite.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Somebody like that every day. Really, it really is. And frankly, I've enjoyed it every moment of it. So you just make it, and so many people who are on the show say this whenever they've been on a show, you make it so easy. And that's not an easy thing to do, because we've been interviewed by other shows. And you are just so conscious of what our audience wants to hear and how they prefer to consume it, and what we owe to them. I think that's the power of Supply Chain Now. Just my opinion.
Greg, that's
don't cry, Scott.
It's incredible praise, and I very much appreciate that. It's important to the whole team that we keep our finger on the pulse of our listeners and what are they after and what's important to them, what do they want to hear more about, what's going to help them get a bigger paycheck, grow their organization, solve problems old and new. All of that stuff is what we're constantly seeking to find out. So thank you very much, and keep the feedback to our listeners. Keep it coming. So as we segue into some of the other thoughts and experiences that we want to share here, Greg, I'm not sure the last time we did a milestone episode. You and I both, we don't take ourselves too seriously. We don't take these podcast milestones too seriously. This one's frankly snuck up on us. I think the last time we did something like this was either 600 or 800, one or the other.
Really? I thought it was 5, but okay. Yeah.
It could have been 5. I remember us and the team doing one. Me and Amanda did one. So maybe it was 5. But regardless, we want to share a few eureka moments and thoughts in general that we picked up along the way. And I want to start with, as maybe intuitively, kind of on the content and on the guests. And Greg, before you share a couple of your thoughts, I want to level set with folks, because what I did this morning, Greg, as I was doing a little bit of prep for this, is I went back to episode number 7, Greg. And do you know the significance of episode number 7?
Was it, no, I don't. Was it the first time with your own equipment or something?
No, it was the first time you and I actually collaborated. You were leading a company that you had founded. That's right.
Yes.
So Greg, that was in November 2017.
Okay.
At that time, it was before really we had founded the business that is Supply Chain Now. We were cranking out, get this, Greg, 1 podcast a month. Right? How about that?
How many do we do now?
I don't know.
It's like 2. It's almost 2 a day, isn't it? I mean, it's a lot.
It seems close. At least an episode every Monday through Friday. All right. Yeah. So that right there easily gets us 20, 30 episodes a month. But we were talking about back then in November 2017. It's a lot of same stuff: cloud, Amazon, forecasting, demand sensing. Some of the things that you and but you especially are still passionate about. And if you remember, Greg, we picked on the year 1987 a lot. And we don't know why, but we picked on that quite a bit.
Wonder why that was. It was just because we were, think about that. So it would have been 30 years ago then. So we were kind of throwing back to 30 years ago.
Must have been.
Ancient history. Right.
One last thing. And I wish
That's hilarious.
It really is. I wish we had, I'd brought this clip with me. Maybe that's something we'll do down the road. Is we had our dear friend Albert Sorto with us on that show, and Elba Pareja Gallagher. But we were talking about Christmas orders and holiday gift buying and stuff. And Albert mentioned how he'll talk about something he wants to get, and it pops up on his social feed.
In 2017, I've heard people say that a lot since, but. I mean, 2017 seems like eons ago, doesn't it? But it really was only 5 years. And
yes. Well,
that has been happening for that time. That amount of time is fascinating.
Well, so the funny part is as passionate as you are now about true demand sensing, right? And planning and forecasting, all that true demand signals. Albert said something like, that's probably, Facebook or something listening to me. And one of us made a comment. No, that's Greg. He's determining those demand signals from, right from what you're saying.
From my phone.
So that's right.
Keep talking, people.
But anyway, that was a great episode. And folks, we'll try to put some of those old clips together so you can see it in context. But what about you, Greg? What's recent content maybe that comes to mind?
Yeah, well, several things. It's so hard to cut it down to one person or one episode. But the context that you just gave, what we were talking about 5 years ago, that we're still talking about today, we hear that over and over again from people like Mike Griswold, who you can almost hear his frustration. He has been advising companies for over a decade to move into the 2000s or whatever, right?
Right.
And we hear so many statistics about companies that intend to do certain things. They intend to adopt advanced technology, but haven't yet. And back then in 2017, we were having that conversation. We didn't even contemplate that something like COVID could happen, right? And really show the real fragility of the supply chain. But I think in general, it's the expertise that we see. It's the fantastic leadership. It is, and again, I think this goes to how comfortable you make people in the booth. It goes to how they reveal their real selves when they're in here, and you can't hide it if you're a great leader or a great inspirational. All right, great leader. I'm thinking Rick McDonald and Sandra McQuillan. Great inspirational. I'm thinking Big Show Bob Bova and others, right? I mean, some of them, their personalities are just bigger than life. Real givers, right? The people who have philanthropies. Or we did an episode on veteran voices where some veterans with PTSD really shared their inner selves there, right? I think of Stephen Smitley, who, by the way, as dark as the hours were that he described, he is absolutely smoking right now. He is in such a great place, been successful. We've partnered with him since that. Anyway, I just think about all the impactful people that we have met in every way. I mean, some impacting business, some impacting personal lives. Enrique Alvarez, of course, and his company, who spawned the term. I mean, they really inspired me to come up with the term Give Forward, because their business was about giving first, not giving back. And so we just inverted the term and called it Give Forward. But I think it's things like that that really hit home. It is the real what do you call it? The real humanity, right? That you call it, that that our guests share with our audience.
Agreed. Man, you brought so many memories just in that, what you shared the last couple minutes.
So I was going to suggest this earlier, and by the way, in case anyone wonders if this was rehearsed, it's not. I was thinking, as you think about people or you think about situations, what are some of the names that come immediately to mind, or some of the topics or discussions or words? I know you capture what you call T-Shirt-isms from a lot of people, and there have been a ton of those, right? So
that's right.
My suggestion is you just shout them out as they come to you.
So, well, I got a couple here. It just so happens this is completely unplanned. If Greg has said anything of the utter truth today, it's that he and I jumped on here with our dear friend Justin, who's a great production engineer and then some. And we're gonna just have a real conversation. What comes to mind? We're celebrating, a ton of work. But T-shirt-isms, that's something we regularly stick with. That kind of those moments of brilliance. It's just short enough to get on the back of a T-shirt, and it really, folks know what it means, and it makes you ready to run through walls. Oftentimes, so two of those that come to mind here recently. One was probably on 150 episodes ago. You and I and Kevin L. Jackson were on an episode of The Buzz. Right, it's every Monday, the live stream every Monday across social, 12 noon Eastern time. Then we drop the replay via podcast. And it was around Martin Luther King Day, as I recall. And Kevin, amongst other eloquence that he shared, live a life of consequence, be consequential. And that still rings between my ears. I mean, we see what Kevin does regularly, a ton of nonprofit work. The new museum down in Galveston is going to change how folks, think of the Juneteenth holiday. But man, be consequential, whatever you do. Your quick thought. I got one more I'm going to share in a second, but your quick thoughts on that.
Well, there have been so many of those moments, but Kevin, with everything that he does, gives us opportunities like that. And, a lot of our fellow hosts of the other shows on the network, they're such special people and such experts in their own way, right? And I shouldn't say in their own way, in their own field, right?
Yep.
And that's something, honestly, that I really value, because, I do things outside of this investment and technology advisory and board of directors roles and things like that. And it's great to have people who are sharing their gifts with the world, but aren't just a talking head. They really know this stuff. I mean, so many times you see somebody who's an expert because they had a book ghost written for them that makes them sound like an expert. But I mean, these are people who really still do the doing. I mean, Kevin still advises people on cybersecurity and blockchain, and Kelly Barner still the procurement goddess, right? And Corinne, in terms of supply chain planning, she is out there doing it and has been for about 2 decades. Right?
We never break that cardinal rule.
More than 2 decades, Scott. And so many more, right? I mean, so many people who are still working with us and have worked with us in the past. The supply chain doctor, right? Chris Barnes, still out there doing it. I just think it's great to work with a group of people that can offer so much to the world, not because they just have an opinion, but because they may have an opinion, but it's because they have a tremendous amount and a tremendous depth of experience, knowledge, and curiosity in terms of continuing to learn.
Agreed. Mary Kate Saliva, of course, who now leads our Veteran Voices, Army veteran, and outside
Mary Kate Love, who invented National Supply Chain Day.
That is right. And that
so
was
many
a great
Mary
episode.
Kates. Right. No, you're right. You're right.
Billy Ray Taylor, of course. I mean, you name it. The list of folks that, to your point, are doing it. They're thought leaders in their space. They're moving mountains, and they're giving forward and doing good all along the way. So one other thing, and we really want to make this show not just about like look back moments of shows, right? We really want to kind of share some other things behind the scenes. So I just interviewed Crystal York, and Greg, you may recall Crystal. She's been with us a couple different times through the course of her career. She recently was named the youngest and the first African-American president of the Southeast region of AME, which is a nonprofit organization out there. So
that's awesome.
Right. Busting through, setting all kinds of firsts as we talked about. So as I was interviewing her, one of the questions we asked her was, hey, what would you say to folks? What would you say to kids that want to make their own firsts? Want to be trailblazers of their own? Well, she very unique answer. She goes, I dare you. Challenging those folks.
I love it.
Me and you both. I mean, it was really
that.
It sent chills up my spine because we've heard time and time again, see it to be it, as we've talked with all sorts of folks that really want those world models that look like them in different walks of life, in those upper echelons of leadership. And it's just, it was a wonderful interview. So folks, check that out. I think we're dropping that on by the, just a couple of days after we drop this episode 1000. So let's shift gears a bit though, because you mentioned Give Forward, which is amongst the, we could write a Funk and Wagnall's dictionary on all the genius phrases and words that Greg has coined, all along the way that educates us all. But it's, in many ways, kidding aside, it goes back to purpose. What are you doing for other people, right? And that purpose, as I think about a couple of things, Greg, our supply chain and procurement awards that our whole family got together and made happen. And we were able to write a big check collectively to Hope for Justice, which is out there, leading the fight globally to eradicate modern slavery. I mean, that is noble mission. I think about leveraging logistics for Ukraine, which of course Enrique and the Vector team are leading. But hey, we're supporting it. We're shouting from the mountaintops, trying to rally the troops to help come to the global community that's moving goods that are needed. I think of our work with the now generation, giving a voice to those folks, some of the brightest people you'll meet that are just coming in the industry. We get a lot of feedback that, hearing those voices and what they're thinking, what's between their ears are some of their favorite shows. And then finally, Jenny Froome is one of our dear friends doing great things and really across the African continent. But that series we've invested in for years now, Supply Chain Leadership Across Africa, really changing the conversations and where they're coming from, because there's no shortage of incredible, innovative ideas that will change global business that are there in South Africa and beyond, really, again, across the African continent. So those are some of the things that come to my mind, Greg. When you think of purpose, what comes to your mind?
Well, that's the industry, Scott. That was an organization that basically credited you for their start and current success. So, I think, we don't just say it, we do it, right? And we don't just do it to be able to say it. We just do it.
Right.
And I think that's, there's so many people in our organization and in our audience and in our supply chain and business and personal circles who are ever so giving of their time, of their talents, of their money, right? Yeah. And we've talked about this. So many people ask us, how do you do it? How do you get started, or how do you do it? And I love to quote Lynn and Larry Pardee, who encouraged people to start sailing because they sailed around the world several times as a couple in a tiny boat. And people asked them, how do you do it? And they said, start simple, start small, and start now. So whether you're sailing or you're giving, the answer is still the same. Start simple, start small, and start now. And I mean, I'm a sucker. I'm kind of a sucker. Somebody did that thing where they come up to you at the gas station today and said, hey, in their car and said, hey, we're running low on gas. Can you help me? And I'm just like, I can give you an amount of money. In my head, I'm going, I can give you an amount of money that is meaningful to you and meaningless to me. And so that makes it easy. And I know it's probably a scam, but I mean, they had to degrade themselves to do that. I hope that helps them with whatever problem they have, whether it's gas or whatever. But, I'm a firm believer, which is not always popular at a stoplight, give to all who ask of you, right? Chances are almost 100% that they need the money more than you do, even if it's a sham.
Yep. Excellent point there.
Can I just, on the other hand, say, Charity Navigator, if you really want to make sure that you're giving, and there's no harm in that. I mean, you don't have to be a sucker like me. There's no harm in that, but do run the charities that you give to through charitynavigator.org, and they can tell you how efficient they are with the money, and give to those that are most efficient. And never forget, Goodwill is not a charity. It is a for-profit entity with a CEO who makes $2 million a year.
I really appreciate you brought that up, because it illustrates one of the points I'm definitely going to make. And folks, check out Charity Navigator. Do your due diligence. There's some organizations, unfortunately, that have extremely high overhead, and it really prevents them from serving their mission in a meaningful way. But the frank, honest truth, y'all are hearing it. This is the 1,000th and then some example of that. And some of my favorite moments, especially on live programming, is when Greg gets on, something's got his attention. Oftentimes it's China, and he gives them all of that and then some, and really you got to sit back and let it go, because oftentimes it's brilliant. Number one, it's always, number two, truthful, and number three, it should be said. And so many folks I don't know if it's fear or if it so often goes unsaid. So those are some of my favorite, Greg's going to tell it like it is moments. And Greg, that makes for, at least from my chair and from many other folks we've heard from, captivating live streaming. How about that?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And, I have often said and often been told, and I think everyone should take this to heart, there's a difference between you needed to say that and that needed to be said.
Right.
A lot of people will say something and they'll say, that needed to be said. Did it, or did you just feel the need to say it? And sometimes while I'm doing that, I even wonder myself, but none of it is ever it's not hyperbole. It's all factually based. It's all truthful to the best of my knowledge.
Right.
And usually it's an awakening or a warning to people who otherwise don't hear the full truth.
Right.
And part of what I do with the commentaries that I do on LinkedIn is that I do a lot of saying what you'd otherwise have to read between the lines for. And it's funny you say that, Scott, because I remember, I can't tell you the number of times I've heard this, but it's a lot, hundreds. People will say, Greg, you say the things the rest of us only think. And I have to tell you, I'm willing to take the bullet for everyone who thinks that way. I really am. And it's amazing. It's amazing for to have those discussions, because I am earth first, people first, right? Justice first, equality first, all of those things. I mean, I just think that those are not political stances, right?
Right.
Those are human stances. And I think they're stances worth taking. If you really want to get me ranting, talk about China and slavery, or forced labor, whatever euphemism you want to use. You combine those two things, and there's a couple shows in there.
Oh,
and
gosh.
they're mostly yelling shows.
But it needs to be said. There's so often. I mean, heck, we as we met with Tim Nelson, who leads up Hope for Justice nonprofit. Y'all check that out. Heck, in the hour he spent with us, I think he enlightened both of us in many of the travesties, and unfortunately, it's growing in 2022. I'm ashamed to have to say that. Human slavery, modern slavery.
Is that possible? I know.
How is that possible? Crazy. But nevertheless, so we've kind of talked about content as we kind of reflect a bit. We've kind of talked about purpose, and folks, we share these things with the utmost humility. I mean, they're really important to us, which is why we're talking about it now. We've got some wonderful partners that work with us to really move the needle and help others, and there's a lot of kindred spirits there. And
Can I share just one more thing,
yeah, please,
Scott, that can't possibly be interpreted as bragging, because neither of us have, as far as I know, have given to it. I mean, other than a lot of publicity, and that's the Dave Krejci Foundation. So Allison Krejci is a friend of Supply Chain Now. She's the president of, what's the name of her company?
Wintek Inc.
Wintek Inc, right. And her mother, Donna Krejci, works with us as an executive producer and former CNN producer. And her dad, her father, Dave Krejci, loves sports, has passed away, but left this incredible legacy of the Dave Krejci Foundation, where they make sure that kids that otherwise would not have sporting gear have sporting gear. And if you want to understand impact, this year they made sure that every player at a school in Marietta, Georgia, called Osborne High School, had helmets, which they did not. And otherwise, that school would not have been able to field a team to play football, high school football, which has all of its virtues of, building fitness and keeping kids out of trouble and teaching teamwork and all those other things, but also instills a tremendous amount of pride in an organization, a community, and a school. And that team that almost didn't play football this season started 5-0. That is thanks directly to the Dave Krejci Foundation. That is the kind of impact. I mean, that is the real kind of impact that you can have when you give. I mean, obviously Tim and Hope for Justice, it's far more than hope. That's just the name. It's really Action for Justice. But, and they do a ton also, but sometimes it's local and it's small that you see that real, very real impact. And I am so thankful, of two things. One, that Donna and Dave built this legacy. And secondly, that Osborne doesn't play my daughter's alma mater, Harrison High School, this season. They have been stomping the guts out of everybody.
What's so funny about that story is I had Allison on a show not too long ago talking cybersecurity and some of the things that supply chain leaders need to know. And we talked about that. And we talked about Dave Krejci Foundation, the great work they're doing. Well, prior to that show, I was doing a little bit of homework to kind of get a sense of overall athletic prowess, I'll call it. Well, at least to the records I could find in a quick Google search, Osborne High School hadn't had a winning record since at least 2002. And Greg, as you total those numbers, it ain't real close. So to hear what they're doing this year, buoyed by the confidence and folks that came together and invested in new helmets and, believed in them, to have them undefeated and just killing teams. That is such a great story.
Yeah. It's really making a good friend of mine, Earl Earhart, who is also he's a retired state representative in Georgia. It's making him pretty happy because he went to Osborne High School. So
love that.
You got to love that, right? I mean, he hasn't been in college for a lot of decades.
and high school for even longer. So, all right. So we're kind of we were talking content, we're talking purpose. Of course, those and all their many definitions are really important about this journey here that we're celebrating with you, our listeners. And then we're got a kind of what I'm calling a catch-all bucket, Greg. A catch-all bucket. I'm not sure.
That sounds like an episode extender right there.
No, I might be saving some of the best stuff for last, and I'll try not to get in trouble. If this catch-all bucket was a flavor at Baskin Robbins, I'm not sure what flavor we would call it. I'm thinking it's like stone soup. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. But
all 31.
Right, all 31. But one of the things that we talk about a lot, and I think we've experienced a lot through whether they're video podcasts or live streams or webinars, there's always this moment on the front end we call the pre-show that folks are getting together on the platform. We're checking sound. We're kind of talking about what our game plan is. Oftentimes we're getting to know the folks for the first time.
Right.
And Greg, we might be gazillionaires if we have recorded most of those pre-shows and dropped them as podcasts. I mean, that's some of the best stuff. Sometimes a pre-show, and I'm tongue in cheek here, sometimes a pre-show is almost even better than some of the best conversations we release.
It's funny you say that because it's not always obvious, and probably almost never obvious to our audience, that people tighten up a little bit when the camera goes on and the mic goes on and the red light goes on that says on air. And you can see it. It's not a huge difference, but you can see it. It's almost like I think we probably subconsciously do it. We kind of try to help steer them the right direction a little bit, ask them the question in the right way. But you can see it. We do it a little bit too. We'll go off after a show also,
right,
and go, man, that was really good. Sometimes I wonder when we're in the green room after a show, why don't I ask the question that way? Right, man, that was really good. That answer you gave, that was really good. And I think it's because, this is just my justification. It's because we're trying to present something that is neutral, agnostic, right, as you say, not a sales pitch, even if it's a service provider. We just want you to know their viewpoint on the world and understand what they can do, if it's to that viewpoint or, in other ways. For their time, they get the opportunity to share what their company does, right? So anyway, we're trying to keep that agnostic, and I think sometimes I defend that a little too strongly, maybe. Yeah. I don't know.
Nah. Nothing you do is too strong, man. Keep it all coming. We need extra doses of Greg White. And they all said, amen. All right. So let's talk about, I mean, heck, you're kind of making the next point, just kind of dawned on me. Greg and I hope, and Justin, keep me in check here. This is how I feel, is that what you see here is the same as if you caught us at an event or whatever. This is 100% authentic. And I laugh a lot. Greg laughs a lot. Sometimes at me, sometimes with me. But our team
sometimes irreverently about the topic, right?
Right.
I mean, sometimes we're a little bit cavalier around terribly serious topics, right?
Right. Well, and so two thoughts come to mind. First off, the last few years have taught us many things, and not just the last few years, just work life, business, this business journey in general, the ups and downs that life and business are going to take you, but always maintaining a healthy sense of humor, right, has been really important. But also, some folks create content in their spare time and love it. Some of the best content's out there. We happen to be creating content while building a business and building a team and serving many organizations. And so when I talk about the sense of humor and we're having fun, I had a former business partner once tell me that if folks are laughing and they're laughing regularly, that is a great sign. It doesn't mean you're going to build a $1 billion empire, but man, it is really a great sign. And Greg, that's one thing as I think about our family here and how we may appear to folks that aren't, rubbing elbows with us. That's a really big part of the culture here, right?
It's huge. I mean, first of all, we take this industry and the opportunities and the failures and the ups and downs and all the learnings, the fragilities, the resiliencies, all of those other keywords. We take all of that very, very seriously. But at the same time, you do have to kind of sit back and chuckle. And it is fascinating. This is another thing. We ought to record what's in the green room, because we could do outtakes where Catherine or Amanda or Chantel or Clay especially say something that is just so hilarious that we had somebody who had blinds in their office the other day, and no one could figure out how to use the blinds. And Catherine said, "It's the blinds leading the blinds." So, and we all cracked up, except for the poor guy who was in an office full of blinds, which somehow resolved itself, by the way. I mean, talk about divine intervention. Who knows? But you're right. It is. You have to have a healthy dose of humor. As many people say, if I don't laugh, I'll cry. And
right.
And what we do is a very serious business. I mean, I think we would all argue, and I think a lot of people would agree with us, finally, after decades, that supply chain is the business, right? Supply chain delivers on every promise you make, from a sales promise to a marketing promise to a branding promise to a corporate identity and a corporate ethicality to a core value promise that your company makes, right? Supply chain touches every one of those things, and it can be very serious and it can be very, very costly. And at the same time, and I hope it doesn't come across this way. It's kind of easy for me, and I think for you too, because we've been doing it so long and we've had the benefit of doing it a lot, but also of learning from some of the best practitioners in the industry every single day. And I think I particularly can be a little bit cavalier with some of the discussions, calling things stupid or this or that or whatever, right? Because they are kind of funny to me. But in the end, I recognize why things are the way they are and that they still need to be seriously approached and fixed or taken opportunity of, and that kind of thing. So,
yep.
But yeah, it is. And it is so much fun because we deal with people in a trade that we all know so well. And occasionally we just kind of hit on something where we're like, never thought of it that way before.
Oh boy, you're absolutely right. And all of that is very, we probably both have been around plenty of folks in our journeys that they're one way in front of people or maybe behind their desk at work or whatever. And then when you get into private, they are completely different. But here it's you get what you see in so many different ways. And that's a good way to be.
Some people are tight as a drum 24/7. And honestly, I feel sorry for those people because life must be life's a struggle enough as it is. I mean, things go wrong, right? And everything. But man, if you can't just every once in a while, just sit back and chuckle a little bit.
Do your blood
life's
pressure
got to be
good.
tough.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great segue to this next thing I wanted to bring up.
I don't know how you do that. I'm not kidding you. Nobody believes that this is unscripted anymore. And I'm telling you, folks, it's not. I don't know how he does it, but that's what makes him the greatest host in all of digital media. It is.
You're too kind, way too kind. But going back to what you were saying a second ago, about the good days and the bad days and the things that work and the things that don't work.
Yep.
When you're building a business, because truly, here we're on a podcast, but between live streams, webinars, virtual events, other written content, helping campaigns be heard sometimes for the first time when they're startups and they're going through those throes. Other times are big brands that want to find different demographics across our global audience. You name it, helping really amplify and building a business around amplifying the voice of global supply chain. But hey, I'll be the first person to tell you, I'm not going to roll it out and parade it, but we experiment a lot. And if every experiment's working, you are completely in your comfort zone and you're not going to, find niches and find truly innovative ideas. And that brings me to a thought, Greg, because as we're experimenting, not only do we experiment, and look, we're both entrepreneurs. You've done some really big things that we've talked about in some previous shows, and I'm proud of to partner with folks like you that have done what you've done. But as we've experimented in supply chain now, not all of it's been content, shows, or talent, or hosts, or whatever. Some of it has been business relationships, right? And a lot of times, thankfully, we have found kindred spirits that do business the right way, right? Yeah. And with value and ethics and all that good stuff. But on the other hand, here and there, we find out folks that when the chips are down, they don't do business the right way.
Right.
And when I was thinking about what we want to share here, I'm the last person that airs dirty lines or anything, but it's really, I think we should be cognizant, especially as someone like me, Greg, we were just talking about it, in the last couple of weeks. It's easier for me to throw trust around and over trust, and then you get burnt, and it's like, man, I'm never gonna touch.
Then you're really
again.
pissed,
right? But finding those folks to do business with as you're building your business that do it the right way with ethics and values. And when I think of what's gone into 1,000 episodes, some of those great names certainly come to mind. Your thoughts, Greg?
Well, yeah, we. So many thoughts here.
Right.
You and I just had this discussion while I was at the airport yesterday, right? When people show you who they really are, believe them the first time. That's the best advice that Maya Angelou ever gave any of us, the very best. And she gave a lot of advice. But I think when you're dealing with other entities, I think you also have to recognize that sometimes the pain they inflict on you I don't want to say not intentional. It's negligent,
right?
Because people are for good reason and to their own credit are selfish and very self-interested, and you have to be, because pick a vendor. Right. Pick anyone that we work with.
I've got a couple in my mind right now.
Well, I don't want you to name them. We're thinking of the same person, as a matter of fact. I guarantee it. She has a twin. We are, they are, while they want to be fair to you, they can't overcome their own self-interest. It is, in fact, the concept of enlightened self-interest that you're looking for. And what you have to ask is I approach things kind of inversely, and I kind of look for what could go wrong or what could diverge our interests first. and analyze business partners that way. And that way I have, I think, a more realistic expectation, or at least an understanding. And for me, it helps me because I used to think that everybody who even inadvertently did me wrong was trying to screw me, as I used to tell people. And I still love to say, I wouldn't be so paranoid if everyone wasn't out to get me. But but it's not always intentional. Sometimes it's just negligence.
Right.
Right. And you see that a lot in supply chain. You see retailers being negligent to their suppliers and having, not nurturing the relationship.
Yep.
My favorite phrase of COVID. It's too, when all the toilet paper was hitting the fan, it's too late to make friends now, right? If you've been mistreating your trading partners. But you're right. I mean, it's not always roses and daffodils. Sometimes there are some thorns out there, prickly pears.
So true. Shakespearean.
But you know what? The key is however you deal with it, right? Whether you take more of a cautious approach like I do, or a generous approach like Scott does, however you deal with it, just keep your eyes open. And the key is to recognize that most people are not trying to harm you or your business. They are just negligent. And if you are aware of what their self-interests might be, you can see where they would have the potential to do you harm.
That's right.
Whether they want to or not.
And there are lessons to be learned there, whether it is interpersonal partnerships, supply chain partnerships, all points in between, but really finding those organizations and those leaders that do business the right way. Now, a couple last points, and we're going to let folks have their day back or their evening back or what have you. I think a business leader, some of my favorite conversations, and really it goes beyond content. When I think about some of the lessons that these shows and conversations have taught me, is some of the most successful leaders we've sat down with, right? Whether it's in person or remotely or whatever. And these folks are top of the mountain, working for either very successful startups or, big time brands everyone knows.
Yeah.
Right. So often these leaders are so humble and so oftentimes painfully honest, even vulnerable. And all of that teaches me time and time again how that allows them to not only garner the trust of their teams, sometimes global workforces, right? But also then find opportunities because of how they lead. These are oftentimes these are companies that have got so much of it already figured out because they're successful, but they don't sit on that, and their leaders don't sit on that. And it really portrays the culture of organizations that continue to succeed. And that's been, for me, I sit back and just kind of, sometimes I got to close my mouth because it's like, it's like a master class time and time again.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
Your thought?
Well, as I usually do, I had the inverse. We've seen some, and I have commented on some truly horrible leaders.
Very true.
Right.
One of my favorite moments for sure.
And oddly, I was proven right, sadly for the members of the company, but thankfully they were all saved and baddies were
ejected.
Yes, thank you. I don't know why executed came to mind. But we also see so many leaders at every level, and I think that is one of the most important things that we talk about so much is you can lead from anywhere. Right? Lead from the front, lead from the back, whatever, but lead from wherever you are, right? You don't have to be Rick McDonald. You don't have to be Sandra McQuillan, right? You can be a student, right? We had that whole class of Morgan State students who just an unbelievable graduating class of supply chain now professionals, right? Go on to do great things. And we see them all the time with our now, the now generation discussions that we have. Just some incredible leaders. I'm so embarrassed. I cannot remember his name, but he's at Dell. The first one.
Oh,
come on.
It'll come to me. Keep going.
I want to say Karthik, but it's not, but
it'll come to me.
Okay. Just shout it when it does. I'll talk slowly so you can get a word in. But people like that who are so aware.
Karn.
Yep. Very good, man.
Yeah, try.
So that's another thing, by the way, gang, that makes him the best host ever. He can recall an episode that we did 6 years ago. Well, we haven't done 6 years. 5 years ago.
That's right. 5. We'll stick with 5.
Yeah. But we've seen people leading from everywhere, right? We've seen mentors leading mentees. We've seen mentees teaching mentors things. And I just think that's one of the best lessons that I think anyone could take away from this is you can lead from anywhere. You really can. And all you have to do is take the reins. It might be something small, right? It might be culture, sorry, this is a proud dad moment, but my middle daughter, Delaney, was put in charge of culture at her company of now, I think, 4,000 people.
Wow.
Because when she was the 150th employee, she showed some aptitude and initiative there. And CEO was just like, that's yours now. So she even coaches or has coached, I don't know if she still does it actively, has coached the CEO on how to exemplify the culture that he wants to see. So
that is incredible.
And that's great leadership on two fronts. First of all, the CEO for recognizing that while I believe the CEO is 100% responsible for the culture of a company, that he, in his case, needed help to keep his own culture and needed guidance himself. That's a huge leadership moment. You talk about being vulnerable, right? I think that, those kind of leadership moments and leadership traits are really, really admirable.
Agreed. Hats off to Delaney. That is awesome. I'm glad you brought that up. So one final on my end. And, for me, this is going to sound really simple, but it's been a mindful practice that's really helped. In the entrepreneurial journey, you've got days, Greg, I know you can relate to it. Justin can relate to it. Many of the listeners, for that matter, whether you're an entrepreneur or a practitioner
or not, right? Just days
whatever,
of work,
right? The days can come at you. Some of these days so fast, right? So fast, and folks want you to make decisions, or they want resolution, or they want other things, whatever. And we talk a lot about a strong bias for action. Deeds, not words. That's core to who we are. But as leaders, since we're talking kind of leaders, best practices there. Some days, some of the best things you can do is call timeout, shut down email, sit on a bench in the park, and give your mind an opportunity to actively work a challenge, an innovation, a dilemma, whatever it is. If you stay in the do all the time, you're really you're going to make more mistakes than you have to. You're going to make some really bad decisions, probably more than really thinking things through and just taking those regular moments. So calling time out is a good thing. Stopping and thinking and not always doing has certainly been a big part of this 1,000-episode journey or 5-year journey, or whatever you want to call it. Greg, your final thoughts, whether related to that or anything else you want to throw in the kitchen sink here.
Yeah, well, to that point, I think it's really interesting. So we actually had a leadership coach at Blue Ridge, and the first thing he said was, if you want to know if you've hit the ceiling or are hitting the wall as a leader, if someone asks you how was your day and your answer was busy, and that's all you can come up with, then you have hit the ceiling as a leader, and you don't have enough time to reflect and solve, right? You're just doing all the time. I think you want a simple test. If that's your answer when you get home and talk to the family, how was your day? Busy, right? You're not only not being as productive as you can as a leader, but you're not drinking in everything you can. And I have to tell you, it was a huge challenge for me, because I used to watch those television shows where a cop gets into a case and gets way too far into it. And then her boss says, you need to take a couple days off. And she's like, no, I'm not going to take the day off. Yes, that wasn't right. That wasn't a request. That was an order. And then this cop is just like totally dumbfounded, wandering around the park, sits on a bench, sees something small that's not even related to the case, and has a breakthrough. And that happens. It happens when you open your mind to it. And I think you have to be, as you said, Scott, and you are very good at, be very conscious to give your mind the space to do that. And I think that's important. That's hugely important. And to be able to reflect, to check out a little bit, right? And it is amazing how often it just happens to you.
Yep. Agreed. Agreed.
So where do you do your best thinking, Scott? I'm curious.
Oh, gosh. Well, I was talking about a park bench. So we spent a lot of time in Monroe, Georgia, right? There's our studios in Atlanta.
That's where I envisioned when you said that. Yeah.
Well, there's a great little square and kind of in front of the local courthouse. And you got kind of like Main Street, USA, kind of like the downtown area. So there's a little bit of people watching. You got squirrels and birds, and you're just far away enough where, you're not in the thick of the hustle and bustle. So you got something to kind of occupy your mind as your mind occupies you.
Yep.
And so whether it's in my backyard for that matter, whether it's driving, I don't know about you, but if I'm driving, I'm solving something with my brain. That windshield time, keeping the phone and sometimes even the radio off.
Mm-hmm.
That's been some eureka moments for me. How about you?
Yeah, driving is a big one for me. Hiking or going for a walk or whatever is big. Strangely, waking up in the middle of the night. So
Really?
for my entire adult career, I've either had a what used to be called a tape recorder, a digital recorder, with me.
Interesting.
Or a notepad or a digital recorder, now my phone, next to the bed, because I'll wake up and not be able to go back to sleep until I spill it. Because I know if I go back to sleep, I'm going to forget it. And sometimes I never come back to it, but occasionally it's one of those things that is, you just solved quantum physics, right? So, okay, I don't even know what quantum physics is.
Makes two of us.
But whatever is quantum physics to us is as vexing as that to us, right? I think actually weirdly that kind of pop up in the middle of the night.
I bet you'll have it. You'll have a urge tonight. I bet, and you'll have to share the $1 billion idea that hits your brain tonight. Well, in fact, we'll drop it in episode number 2000. So it's coming soon.
That's a good idea.
Well, folks, hopefully you're still with us as Greg and I have kind of shared some things that are important, lighter-hearted moments, but also very serious moments of this journey we're on with you, and certainly with our team. I want to give a big shout out to Amanda, who was right there beside me when it was, episode 1, before it was, as we we're still figuring out what we were doing, and then Greg at episode 7. That was a big moment, and we've had so much fun while moving the needle and amplifying so many of the conversations and topics. Some of them get a lot of attention, and many of them have not. And we're going to continue, to our listeners. That's our commitment to you. What you've seen over the last 1,000 episodes, especially the better ones. We're going to continue to deliver on that brand promise to you. Content that is of consequence, missions, noble missions, with lots of purpose that really help others in a very practical way. And that's core to who we are as people. While all those things, while having some fun, and hopefully you're smiling at least once, maybe laughing at least once an hour. That's what I tell my kids when I drop them off in the morning. Find a way to laugh at least once an hour, right? And they can almost recite that and about 7 other things I share with them in a stupid, hokey dad sense, but with good intent.
Don't remember it though.
I hope so.
They'll forget it from the time they're like 13 to about 23, but then they'll come back and go, I'm sorry I was such a brat when I was 13 to 23.
Greg, I so much see that. But I want to give you, we're going to sign off here in just a second. But Greg, we take this, to your point earlier about halfway through. This is very real. We're very serious about what we're building, what we're doing in so many different levels here. Your final thought before I sign us out. Not like school. Sign us off. I guess signing out. Remember the old days?
Signing out means we can go to the Dairy Queen, right with Grandma. She used to sign me out of school,
or to the dentist, which is not fun.
Yeah,
but anyway.
No, never that, never. I think, gosh, there's just so much. There's no way to do what we experience on a day-to-day basis justice in even an hour or whatever this episode's going to take. Edit vigorously, Justin, by the way. But I think the important thing for all of us to recognize is that we are all, and we really believe this, we are all in this together. Just today, the very first customer of Blue Ridge, my company, called me today and said, we need to talk about, whether we need AI for this or robotic process automation or whatever. And he said, Jürgen Schlieder, who is in charge of supply chain at CRP Industries, said, I've listened to a couple of your shows about AI and other advanced technologies. And I so locked on that. Oh, you listened. I didn't even hear what he said after that. He may have said, and I think you're an idiot, because I don't know what he said after that. But, it's good to know that we are or can reach people like that and give them something of value. And that is because we truly believe we are in this with you. Look, we do still some, but we don't always do this every day like you do. We are not in the thick of it every single day. But we are some days, and we're keeping our hand in it, and we're trying to be as knowledgeable as we can about the things that and deal with every single day, and the things that we can do, or we can facilitate, or we can prompt people to do that help advance the practice of supply chain, and by virtue of that, enhance this global commerce network that exists around the world, right? So, I hope we're doing something good. I know that we are, but I hope that it's valuable to people, not for our sake, but for theirs.
Yep. Well said. Folks, thank you for being with us. Some of you may have been with us through all the first 1,000 episodes and some other things we've been up to. Some of you may have just joined us in the last, last couple dozen episodes. And that's right. Some of you may have joined us the last 4 minutes or 40 minutes, but we're grateful. We are, like Greg says, we're all in this together. Keep the feedback coming. Feedback, as Kelly Barner and Phil Addison have said, feedback is certainly a blessing. But hey, hold on to your hat, because you ain't seen nothing yet. Big finish to this year, and just wait to 2023. So with all of that said, that certainly felt like a Baskin Robbins trip where we touched on every flavor, but with lots of intent and goodwill for all, and sharing. You get what you see. Sharing some of the things that really have stopped us in our tracks or made us laugh our socks off throughout this journey. We're going to sign off here and call this episode 1000, and we're going to look back on this maybe in 40 years and say, man, what in the world were they thinking?
What a couple of idiots.
Right. But it is what it is. Folks, thank you. Thank you. Keep the feedback coming. Hold us accountable to this mission we're on. And with all of that said, on behalf of Greg White and our entire team here, our family here at Supply Chain Now, this is Scott Luton challenging you. Hey, it's all about deeds, not words. Do good, give forward, and be the change that's needed. And with that said, we'll see you next time right back here at Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for being a part of our Supply Chain Now community. Check out all of our programming at supplychainnow.com, and make sure you subscribe to Supply Chain Now anywhere you listen to podcasts. And follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. See you next time on Supply Chain Now.